Hi, I'm Kasia Kuzmicz-Kowalska and welcome back to Science on Trial and Error. Can you believe it's already episode 3 of our new season, featuring stories from beyond academia? Firstly, thank you for the messages we received regarding episodes 1 and 2. Your engagement means the world to me. If you're curious about how to connect further, our Instagram page offers behind-the-scenes glimpses and opportunities to vote for future guests. Meanwhile, our growing community on LinkedIn delves into the ideas explored in each episode, so be sure to join us there by following Science on Trial. If you enjoy the podcast and wish to support us in covering software license costs and expanding our project, you will find the link to our Buy Coffee page in the episode description. Now, let's jump into today's episode. As a budding scientist, the ultimate dream career is to become a professor. Ideally, tenured, of course, that's the goal. You pour your heart and soul into applying for endless grants, sending out papers, also crying over reviewer number 2 comments and rejections. And through it all, you always see the professorship as the end game. It will be worth it. But what happens when you reach that pinnacle and find it less fulfilling than anticipated? What if you feel like it could be better? The way you lead, the way your team functions. Our guest today, Peggy Sotiropoulou, has been in this position. She went through a thriving academic career. She got her PhD degree at Cancer Immunology and Immunotherapy Center in Athens. She then progressed through 2 postdoctoral positions, moving from Athens to Brussels, spanning short 4 years. After that, she secured a tenured position of Research Associate Professor at FNRS, Funds for Scientific Research in Brussels, leading a team investigating cancer initiation, growth, and resistance to therapy. She reached the goal. She had a tenured position, but her journey didn't stop there. Then she transitioned to industry. Spending 3 years at Celiad Oncology, she swiftly ascended from R&D manager to the esteemed role of head of R&D. Today, she is the chief scientific officer, the CSO at T-Knife Therapeutics, a biotech company dedicated to pioneering novel cancer therapeutics, particularly supercharged TCR-Ts, T-cell receptor therapies. In our conversation with Peggy, we delved into the questions that many ponder when contemplating the transition from academic research to the biotech industry. How does the approach to scientific inquiry differ between academia and industry? When is the optimal moment to make the leap to industry? Does research progress quicker in industry settings? Are there any aspects of scientific work that are lost in the transition to industry? And how many of these perceptions are actually misconceptions? Moreover, what does it mean to navigate the landscape of biotech leadership as a woman? Prepare to be captivated by Peggy's journey and enriched by her invaluable insights and advice. Her story is not just inspiring, but also profoundly informative. From her unexpected beginnings as a travel magazine writer to her current role as a powerhouse in the biotech realm, Peggy's trajectory is a testament to ambition, resilience, and foresight. Join us till the end as we explore not only Peggy's remarkable journey, but also her outlook on the future of the therapeutic industry, and we even touch upon our favorite Greek filmmaker. Get ready for an episode packed with insights and inspiration you'll be glad you didn't miss. Enjoy and welcome Peggy Sotiropoulou. Hello, Peggy. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you very much for finding the time to join us today.
Good morning, Kasia. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here.
So how are you doing? Where are you right now?
I'm sitting in my attic in Brussels and it's not raining. So it's an exceptional, nice, sunny day. So starting the week in a positive way.
Yeah, it's also sunny here in Vienna, actually. It's been sunny for the last few days, and it's always nicer when you can see the sky, right? It gives a lot of boost to your motivation.
And creativity.
Exactly. It's a good Monday weather, I must say. It's easier to start the week this way. Okay, so I think it would be good if I give a little bit of an introduction to our listeners about you. There will be a bigger one before the episode, but just to give a little bit. So our guest today is Peggy Sotiropoulou, and Peggy is currently working as a Chief Scientific Officer, CSO, at T-Knife Therapeutics. And it's a company that develops TCR-T-based therapies. And Peggy agreed to give us a bit of background on working in R&D, on working in biotech industry, and also on her transition from academic career as a professor to being a CSO. So thank you very much, Peggy. And I think it would be good if we start with your current work. So if you could tell us a little bit about what it is that you do as a CSO, and then we can move forward from that.
Yes, sure. So a chief scientific officer is the head of all the research activities that happen in an organization. And this can vary really considerably depending on what organization are we talking about. So, for example, if you have a startup that just spun out of the university, that means that you lead a very small team for a few researchers. Now, if you work for a large biotech or a pharma, that can mean that you lead multiple departments on the same time. So in my current function, T-Knife Therapeutics, I lead 4 departments. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger. And that means that I have the discovery, which means the next generation technologies, how we will change ourselves to make them more potent and being able to deep and durable responses. Then the preclinical department, this is the department that will generate all the scientific data we need to have a regulatory submission. So that means to persuade the regulatory authorities that our treatment is effective and safe. The third is the process design. This is a very, very different between academia and industry. When you can do something on your bench, that doesn't mean that you can do it to treat a patient. So you need to have something large scale. You have to have something that every single time gives exactly the same profile. And this has its own challenges. So I have a team who is working on designing the process that then will give to manufacturing to scale up. And finally, the translational research, which is the team that takes the samples from the patients that are already treated to understand whether the therapy works, how it works, what are the challenges, or what happens to the patient after they have been treated. So this is my life as a CSO. And in general now, the main role of a CSO is to shape the scientific strategy of the organization. And I said a lot of times, science, science, science. Mm-hmm. And this is the core of my job, but it's just one of the many responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, the scale of it sounds huge. And I guess each of this department requires a little bit of a different approach when it comes to managing it and helping your people do their best. So you have experience as an actual scientist working in the lab. Was it harder to learn to lead the team that does the basic R&D, or was it harder to lead the team that is more industry centered, like the scaling up team, as you said?
So in general, I believe that a good scientist should understand science and should work across different disciplines. During our academic careers, for example, I did my PhD that was in cancer immunotherapy. Mm-hmm. Then I started doing, I think, a very small transition at the end of my PhD that I was working a little bit on stem cell research. And then I moved to do a postdoc that was on cancer initiation and the response to therapy. And then I had my own team working on the response to therapy, stem cells and cancer stem cells, and implication to aging and cancer. So this means that I have worked across the different small differences on different disciplines, and the same happens with most of the researchers I know. So it's more interesting than challenging.
Okay,
manage those teams. And I must say that I am quite spoiled because I have an excellent team of amazing scientists. So my real challenge has never been science there, because while science is the main job, actually CSO has many other responsibilities. Take it from the top. Indeed, you design the overall strategy. So that's the vision of the company. Then you have to design the operational plan, how to get there. So what is the mission of your team? Then you have to put together the team that can execute on this mission. And of course, as in academia, the same in industry, you have to find money to do all this. So you have to communicate this vision, to communicate the results to all the relevant stakeholders, and then being able to have the means to progress. So the work goes between leading the scientists, understanding the science, making the strategy, doing the day-to-day work on analysis of these results, but it's also more about the operations and about the communication, the leadership, and mentoring these people.
So it's clear that you like the science the most. What do you like the least? What's the most dreadful task? Is it budget or something like this?
You're a scientist as well, so you do understand. Yes, I like numbers when they have to do with science, but putting budgets together, that is something that you have to do, but it's never the more enjoyable part. I do used to tell for my previous company that I was, I had a person that was my operations manager, as lab manager, but mostly was leading the operations of my team. I was a head of R&D there, and he was very protective of the budget. He was the budget king, making it, following it. So I spent years after leaving the company saying, I miss Jan. So Jan, if you hear me, I still miss you for the budget.
Yeah, I can imagine this being the least likable part of the job. But it sounds extremely cool because you communicate with scientists, so you still have very active contact with the science and you need to be on top of what are the new developments. Then you need to talk to different types of audiences to communicate your results, like stakeholders, and also going to conferences. So I guess this keeps you really on top of your game and you really need to stay on top of your game. But I guess your days can be extremely long. Also, the company is on 2 continents. Do I get it right? So how do you manage that? Because this sounds extremely busy.
It is busy. And it's exactly that gives you the adrenaline rush, which is very good as well. So I spend a fair amount of time in traveling. So I think the last 2 years, I was traveling 50% of my time. As I mentioned, the companies in Berlin and in San Francisco. So as I mentioned, so there are 9 hours of difference there. We have our research activities mainly in Berlin, and then there is more business accounting in San Francisco. That means that during the day, I spend most of my morning with the European colleagues or European activities, and the afternoon, late afternoon, with my US colleagues or for US based activities. I do like to keep my very early mornings to stay on top on scientific research and for corporate intelligence. Is exactly what you mentioned. The field is evolving extremely fast. That means that you have to stay on top, first of all, on the science. Be sure that what you're doing is relevant. It will be relevant in 5 years from now that you'll get the very early steps of science to a patient, but also it's relevant based on what others are doing. It doesn't make sense to make a copy.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Then it's not useful for the patients either. So that means that you have to do something that makes sense scientifically and makes sense as a matter that you have a differentiator factor, and that will be different than what the others are offering.
So your previous experiences, you worked in a different company before and you also worked in the R&D department. And before that, you were an associate professor in Brussels at FNRS. And my question is, I mean, you mentioned it yourself that you tried to do different steps. So you did basic science, but you also did a bit of translational science, if I understand correctly. How different is really working in the industry compared to what you did before with respect to, let's say, even approach to scientific question? Is it really that different?
So I started from more translational research and the basic research, and then I moved to industry. And in this last almost 20 years of this career, that I do understand that tells a lot about my age, I went back and forth on different disciplines. And what I can tell is that both in academia and industry, you need 3 things to be successful. You need excellent science, excellent team, and a lot of money. What we are doing is extremely expensive. So these are the 3 points that we do have both in academia and industry. You do it, though, from a completely different way. Work in industry is much more focused and it has more immediate results. You also have the possibility to get more dedicated teams because the scientists in your team know that can evolve in different ways. Having a team in academia means that unfortunately you can keep with you or as your peers in different companies only the ones that are interested in fundamental research. The ones that have different skills or different desires, then you cannot keep them.
Yeah.
While when you're in industry, it's so multifunctional. So that means that you can support the evolution of a person, even if they are not interested in your core activity. And that allows you to mentor better the people, to give them more opportunities, and to have them more engaged. You can have them dreaming, regardless what is their dream. And that allows you to make more flexible teams, more multifunctional teams, and happier teams. And happier teams work more effectively.
So you mean you can adjust more easily than in academia? There's more flexibility and also more flexibility when it comes to hiring people based on their backgrounds. Okay, that sounds actually really interesting because, you know, when people discuss the benefits of transitioning to industry, there's a number of things that come up. And actually, I asked my listeners also if they would have any questions to you. And one of the questions that came up was whether you think that working in industry provides a better job security. Because there has been a lot of discussion about this. And I feel like there can be a little bit of a myth there because academia can also be considered as insecure because you need to get funding. But in a company, I guess this is also not as secure as some people would like to believe. Maybe you can shed a bit of light on this.
Yes, this is a great point, and I have been discussing it a few times with persons like me that had a long career in academia before moving to industry. So indeed, you don't have a permanent position. This is true. However, the job security comes more from the flexibility. Indeed, we passed the last 2 years. That was a very hard time for biotech industry. So you can hear a lot of words to correct, ranging from bear markets, which is the official term, to bloodbath that I have seen in some articles. So indeed, there are several companies that had to lay off personnel or that closed down in the biotech industry. Now we're happy that the market started. Still, you can lose a job in one company, but usually you can find a job at another one. So really, there is no permanent position, but you can always go to another company and have another job at a new environment. Working in a large pharma, I've never worked in a large pharma, but large pharma is a more secure environment than is biotech. Again, it's a completely different environment that I cannot, as I said, I haven't worked on that. It doesn't seem to fit my type of personality because I like this adrenaline rush that I told you. So moving very fast, having every person in the company that does a work that matters, from the first to the last person in the biotech. If you lose them, there's an impact on the job, which is very important to have the impact in the company. So persons that are not afraid on the risk that they may have to change, and they don't already say, no, that's not for me. I think that it is worth trying because there are always opportunities.
So do you think that growth perspectives in a biotech company would be, let's say, at a faster time scale, or also there would be more growth possibilities compared to academic path, which is very unidirectional, honestly?
Exactly. So, of course, there are more opportunities and there are faster opportunities. So you can invest more energy and grow faster or not. In my first company, in 3.5 years, I had 4 promotions. So there's not a time limit. As long as you're good in what you're doing, then you can progress further. It's a more meritocratic environment in general. At least this is my opinion. There's increased transparency and collaboration because there's less ownership. There's more flexible mindset. And I guess the radically increased salary is also a benefit that you do have when you join industry. That is worth mentioning.
When you transitioned to the industry, you were already a professor, which is the goal for many people. We already discussed a bunch of pros and cons. What were the key considerations for you when you were making this decision?
So I had a tenure position equal to an associate professor that in the FNRS, the National Fund for Scientific Research of Belgium. And at one point, I started wondering why industry cannot transform all our excellent research, all the science and cell and nature papers that we have into drugs. So where is the blocking point? I was extremely lucky that my tenured position came with the possibility for a career interruption. So I could take 1 year break, maintaining my position in order to try something else.
Oh, that's really cool.
Of course, that means that going back without funding, without personnel, so it wouldn't be that easy, but you keep your position, you have the possibility to get back on track. Also, I had just passed my 5-year evaluation. So showed that I had produced enough papers, I had already enough funding, so I could continue. So I did this with a very good safety net.
Smart. Yeah, of course. Smart considerations.
Which I know that not many people have. The first thing I did some career coaching. Also, I wasn't 30 years old. I was at my mid-40s. So that meant that would have significant impact on my career, on my family. So I had to take a very reasonable decision, regardless of the safety net I had. I did some career coaching, which was extremely important to me. I didn't even know that there are specific career coaches that dedicate their activities in a life between academia and industry or in biotech industry. So they're experts in everything. I didn't have much exposure to an industry, so I couldn't really grasp well the biotech environment, as I think is not uncommon.
Yes. Exactly.
So it was very important for me to explore what industry jobs entail and whether I had the right skills to go there. These coaching sessions gave me the first confidence that this is something that I should try. Then I explored with persons I met, mainly through LinkedIn, or persons that knew other persons that knew other persons, actually expanding my network to see what type of biotech I want to work on. The scientific area and the scientific focus, it was very easy. Because I understand where is the unmet need, but what size of company? A startup of 5 people or a big pharma? In which position? So again, there, trying to find people with experience and guide you what is better for you, for your skill set and your area of expertise and your ambitions, how fast you want to go. It is very important. And I do remember that I had a very important input by a friend of a friend who told me that in the level you are, you cannot spend 5 years being at one position. You would like to go further. Every time you do a change, you have to go one step back because you have to adjust in the new environment. But you don't want to spend too much time until you grow back to a level equal to what you were before or higher. So you have to go to a company that is small enough so people can see you across the departments, but big enough to have all the supportive environment so you don't have to learn, as we said, accounting, budgeting, operations. And this is what I did. So I wanted a company with a little bit more than 100 persons working on CAR T-cell therapies at that moment. And as I told you, my evolution was fast enough. And in a company, as long as you can do something, people will ask you to do it. So you can evolve in the right direction.
That's a very good advice, actually, to really consider also where you want to be, let's say, in a few years. And based on that, really make your informed decision. And also having these informal interviews just with your network and getting a bit more information of how is it to work at this company or the other company. So you said you talked to the coach, you did the informal interviews. Do you think there's something that could be done to make these transitions easier? For instance, more visibility for different careers. Yeah, let's start with that. Do you think there's something more that could be done?
Yes, so as I said, the two important points that I had and made this transition easier. The one was the possibility of career interruption, and the second is the career coaching and my network in order to understand the field. So indeed, knowing the options is very important. I have seen people in academia that are more fit for industry and vice versa. The challenges and demands are unique, so it is very important to understand them, at least at the basic level, so to have an informed decision. Being able to understanding while you are in academia doing your PhD or during your basic studies, what are the career options are important. You see it now in some US universities that they have very, very high startup activity.
Yeah.
That is very easy to have this exposure. And I think this also shows why we have more entrepreneurship and what we have more careers like that in these environments. And I have the possibility for a career interruption, but I think that could be a little bit more expanded and being able to have a path back quite easier. Because it's not an easy choice to take. So people have to try. And actually, if people can know from academia that join the industry for a year or 2 years, do not find it like it. I fell in love with it after a couple of months. But I understand that many people do not like it. But you learn so many things, finance, management, business, leadership, that going back to academia, this would be a huge benefit, both for the person, but also for the department. So these interactions should really be fostered so as to be able to have benefit both in academia and in industry.
But unfortunately, for instance, academic funding does not really support such breaks. So maybe also having this kind of opportunities from funding agencies to support certain periodic transition, even if you want to later come back, would be actually helpful. Because one of the problems of PIs in academia is that they are very good scientists, but they may not be so good at management because they didn't have so much exposure coming straight from a postdoc to a PI. But perhaps working in a company could be helpful in creating better leaders for academia as well.
Exactly. I think if I was going back to academia right now or 2-3 years ago, I would also do a better job with my team, with everything I learned. And one point is for the funding to be able to support these transitions, but also the criteria for positions. So we have age criteria or we have the criteria of the scientific input that are essential. They are key for the professor positions, for the permanent positions in academia. But then having other skills also counting there, that could also be beneficial, to my opinion, if we want to change this paradigm.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to improve this. Another thing that comes to my mind, in your experience as a CSO now, you are hiring a lot of people, probably coming from academia at different levels of their career. Would you say that there is best optimal time to switch from your perspective? Or do you think there's like a majority that comes directly after a PhD? Is doing a postdoc beneficial? What would be your insight on this?
So by default, not all career paths are similar. And we can also have geographical, industry or focus area specific particularities. And we have the one says the minority of scientists that embark on an entrepreneurial journey, creating their own company based on a PhD or a postdoc finding. Indeed, this is minority and it's mainly the US, but we see it also in Europe.
Yes.
And the majority that go after a certain amount in academia. I would say so. The most important point is that somebody to be successful requires a strong scientific background. I would say a PhD and one postdoc. That could be the sweet spot where you have a very, very good scientific baseline.
Yes.
And then you can have the skills, you can develop all the other leadership skills, management, business skills in academia, because there's a lot of soft skill development. Now, people can go earlier, can go later. I went much later than that. And I have seen persons coming just after PhD and still they have a very, very good career path.
I mean, it was a very generalized thing, but I was just wondering, the scientific input matters a lot. What other skills do you think people could develop either during their PhD or their postdoc to make themselves a better candidate to transition to industry? What else can prove to be useful or is something that actually companies are looking for in people who apply for such positions?
That's a very good point. Again, it depends on the level of the industry and the position that you're applying for and you are interested into. So if you're really interested in a scientific career in industry, that means a scientist, manager, director towards a CSO or a CTO position. In this case, I would say focusing really on developing extremely solid scientific skills is the most important path. And then moving to a scientist or senior scientist, then industry will cover everything else, the rest of the skills that have to do with collaboration, with communication and leadership skills. Now, if somebody wants to move directly in higher positions or in management position, regardless the levels of that, it's a little bit more difficult. For example, I started joining meetings with my cheat sheet just for the language. I couldn't understand the abbreviations that everybody was using. The first time that I had to buy an instrument, I had bought dozens of instruments in academia, but then there's a specific quality pathway documentation to do. So joining industry at management levels, it will be very important to have people management skills and some project management skills. That would be helpful. I had the opportunity to have a leadership classes through EMBO when I was in academia. So I had the leadership class for postdocs, for PIs, and for women leaders in science that were amazing. That part helped me a lot when I joined the industry. Now for project and program management, if I had training on this, I think I could have spent less sleepless nights understanding what I'm doing.
Yeah, it is a lot to learn, but I guess in a supportive environment, you can learn pretty quickly. And companies, as you said, they take care of training people in the skills that they are missing. I guess the message here would be that if your science is sane and you want to go into industry, you can really try, and then the other things you can learn on the way, and you shouldn't stop, because I think a lot of people are concerned that they don't have enough on their resume to go to industry. And of course, it depends on the position, as you mentioned, but it is also feasible to just go from an academic postdoc position, let's say, with publications and of course a good record, let's say having funding, to a position in the industry without so much of a scare. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, that people should really try and just see what kind of feedback they're getting, but also they could probably develop in the company once they start.
Yes, when I'm hiring scientists, I evaluate the CVs exactly in the same way that I was evaluating them in academia. It's purely on their scientific background, their scientific skills, their publication record, the possibility to get funding, the awards they have. Exactly the same evaluation that I did in academia, I do the same in industry. If I will hire a manager or a director, there I wouldn't also the verification, the skills that they can lead a team. If you have somebody leading a team in academia, then it will be somebody that I would evaluate further for industry as well. Now in industry, there are a lot of other paths that the scientists should have, communication, regulatory, production, lab management, and there, of course, other types of skills are important apart from science.
Yeah, that's true. It's just making me feel more hopeful. Also for everybody who is kind of fearful about this transition, that it's not so difficult to jump the ship, let's call it like this. And coming back to your transition, what do you think is something that you learned about yourself through this process? Something that you didn't realize before?
So I think I would say that I discovered that I have skills that I really enjoy to use, but I didn't have the chance to do so when I was in academia. Cross-functional leadership and communication are very important here, because cross-functional leadership, to be able to really influence and to lead people that do not report directly to you, it has specific challenges that are very interesting. Interaction with people from different areas, support my team members to have careers that are outside of my expertise and my team. We discussed before about this. And also I realized that I'm very good in strategic planning and in working under pressure. So these are qualities that I had never the possibility to, I didn't really employ them as intensively when I was in academia.
Would you say that your job now requires more creativity?
I think that's a different type of creativity. Creativity is the reason that I enjoy science. And I started studying science at the beginning, and I cannot live without. So this was in academia and in industry. Now I have to be creative in different ways. As I mentioned, I have an awesome scientific team. I enjoy discussing science with them. I take a lot of their creativity and we collaborate together. So I have also to employ my creativity in all the other aspects of my work.
This reminds me of another question that was posed by our listeners. I hope you don't take it the wrong way, but a number of people have mentioned that working in industry, I assume because of the temporal constraints and the pressure that you have, could take away a lot from someone's love to science, and it can be kind of soulless, as some people put it. Please don't take it personally. It's more about this kind of misconception, because I assume this is a misconception, that when you start working for stakeholders and there's someone controlling the time plan, which would be you in that case, because as a CSO, you schedule the time. Does this take away from certain aspects of doing science? Or is this just something that people assume, but it really doesn't come down to it when it comes to a day-to-day work?
So it has to do with the focus on the time of industry. They are companies that are service providers, or they develop solutions for others. There, the research is extremely, extremely focused. And for a person that likes fundamental research, it's definitely not the area to be. There are companies that put more or less focus on the early research, and they prefer to take these assets, to take this knowledge from university collaborations. Yeah. So it exists, but then you have industry that develops the science from scratch in-house. This is something with the company that I work, because of course this is my interest.
Yes.
So the difference is mostly about the ownership and the kill fast part. The ownership that we have in academia doesn't happen in industry. It's more collaborative. So as a PhD or a postdoc, I have my project that if I publish a paper, or if somebody helps me really a lot, it will be the co-first author. But there's always one first and one last author. So there is a lot of me space in there. In industry, it's a teamwork. We work on a project together with others, and everybody have their own part. Also in industry, there is the possibility to kill a project, either because it doesn't go very well, or because for other reasons, you decide to deprioritize. Because it's not only science. As we said, science is business, is finance, is ability to produce what I make on the bench, to be able to get it to the bedside. So these are differences, but as of quality of work and being able scientifically to be creative, then it depends on the company that you go. There are a lot of companies that publish Nature and Cell papers. You just have to have it in larger intervals and a little bit later due to all the business reasons that are behind. But there's a very good research that you can do in industry. It depends in which industry you select to go.
Actually, the 2 points you raise are very important. One is, I feel like sometimes in academia, killing the projects would be beneficial. I heard this once during a mentorship session with a PI who actually had left for industry and came back to academia. And she said that this was the key thing she brought with herself. She gives her people a certain amount of time. And if the project is not working, they just leave it because they don't want to waste people's motivation as well. And she said that this is hard, but on the other hand, it really shifted the pace of the lab work, which I think is a very important thing to keep in mind. And turning around the question, do you think that the work in industry progresses faster because of the teamwork? So do you think the teamwork allows you to take everybody's good sides and then really use this force to progress faster compared to work in an academic team where everybody has their own project? I mean, you try to be collaborative, but it's not the same kind of collaboration.
So there are several points there. The pace can be fast in both cases, because in academia, for example, when you're working in cutting edge research, that means that you always have somebody else that is working exactly the same subject. Sure. If you want to publish a top paper, then either you will scoop somebody by a month or two, or somebody will scoop you by a month or two. So again, the pace there can be extremely fast. I had the pleasure of being in really competitive labs during my academic training. So I worked under these circumstances as well. That was beneficial for me when I joined a company. Now, in academia, I totally agree with you that abandoning projects sometimes could be beneficial. Now, there is a balance always between perseverance, how really succeed my target, that can be not easily achievable. And in academia, you have the possibility to work longer to achieve this. So having perseverance in difficult to achieve subjects, this is something that only academia can do. And this is the basis of very good fundamental research that can serve later for applications. That being said, I have seen projects going on and on and on forever, and some of them could have been stopped earlier.
Yes.
So always about the balance, and it's about the leader, the PI in academia, the CSO or the head of the department in industry, to really decide which project is worth the effort to spend more energy and time on it, and which project should stop because probably the benefit of spending more energy is not worth the effort. So
cost versus benefit comes into play.
But learn to stop earlier is something that is easier in industry.
I would like to now go into you being a CEO and a female CEO. And CSO, sorry. Well, maybe, I'm sorry, yes. It is very encouraging to see more stronger female representation in these leadership positions. And I guess I would like to start with asking, what does it mean to you to really be a female leader, and what does it translate to you?
So you're right, and we can see the numbers. While you see a lot of women in industry, you start looking at the highest levels, then the percentage really drops a lot. I'm extremely lucky. Well, it was also one of my selection points to be in a company where we have the majority of women at all levels, including the senior management. And we have this multicultural environment. So being a female leader, to my opinion, is what any leader should be. So either male or female, you have a set of skills and talents and knowledge, and you use these talents to be productive as a team, to motivate, to support and develop the persons that choose to follow you, and then on the way to have a high impact on what your target is. So in my case, to develop therapies for cancer patients, but regardless the area, this is your the means to have a successful output based on a base of scientists, in my case. That should be either male or female leader, to be honest.
Sure, but do you think that there is a bit more pressure on you to perform well? Because if you don't, it may affect other women going towards leadership positions. Is there something like this in the back of your head? Because I've heard it from a couple of people who I know are in such positions that they feel like they need to perform well because there's a lot of weight on their shoulders representing other women.
So I think I'm lucky that I don't feel like that right now. That doesn't mean that I haven't felt it before. I'm of Greek origins, so I grew up in a rather traditional country.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of being always supported by my family, but it was a traditional country.
So what do you think could be done in the industry in general and in the companies that don't have this to empower women and also to enforce a bit more of this gender diversity, of the inclusion in the companies? What could be changed from your perspective?
We have been in an era that this is under a discussion a lot, and we hear a lot of solutions, starting from quotas to long maternity leaves, work-life balance. And if you think of it scientifically, we're extremely wrong with all of this because we have a funnel and we try to change the output by changing the end of the funnel and not what we're putting inside. So if we want to be impactful, we have to start from scratch. What are the causes? Not starting by giving ibuprofen and aspirin to really treat the symptom, but find why we have in many countries, in many industries, in many fields, we have less women in science or in leadership positions or very few women in board. So the highest you go, the lower percentage you have. I do think that all starts from the beginning. If we see the toys for girls and boys. You have the toys of boys really having the engineer skills or the special interests. And the toys for girls, which is language-based or social skills-based. So we start from that point, how we can address equally boys and girls while they're developing. And then when we're going forward, what are the stigmas around the STEM fields? When I said that now, I feel very well in my shoes, but that was the case before. I mentioned that I travel 50% of my time. And I was traveling a lot, even when I was in academia. And I had a lot of questions. But you have a young kid and you travel, or you work very late and you are not there. So there's a stigma around traveling or long hours and risks. And not everybody has the chance to be in very supportive environments to be able to confront all those. So for me, this is where we have to start. How we develop, so it's schools.
Society level, just in general. Yeah, I see
exactly,
your point.
Society level.
Educating and also showcasing that any career is available to any gender. And I agree. I mean, I feel like this will take a while, but hopefully we are on the right track because there is much more initiatives that are trying to do this. But still, it's like a society mind switch that has to happen. So also policies, I guess, would have to be adapted in a certain way to support that.
Exactly. I remember a discussion that I had with a friend a couple of years ago, and that she asked me, what do you think about the effect of longer maternity leaves on the possibility of women to have better careers? And I said, that's completely wrong. Because if you want to have a high-level position and you want to have 3 kids, you can do this, and you lose like 3 years. Of course, you lose a lot of knowledge and time and everything. So for me, if you want to be equal, then I need longer paternity leaves. I mean, the 9 months of pregnancy is all women. But then after this, both persons can do it equal. So we have to think about not only how to make more comfortable the traditional roles, but how to change these roles and what makes sense. And our role, our women with higher positions in STEM or everywhere else, I think it's about educating, going out and discussing. For example, the fact that you have kids that have happy parents that love their job and they're motivated by their job is very important. So you go out, you talk, and being part of all those initiatives that you mentioned before, I think this is very important to change the mindset.
Agreed. Now I want to go into a little bit more outside of career questions. I mean, they will still touch upon, but more relaxed, get to know you questions. Okay, so you're very passionate about science. It's clear to me that your whole career life is centered around this, and you transitioned to biotech. You really wanted to do science and this was your drive. But if you couldn't do science, what would you like to do?
So do I have to tell not science or not biomedical science?
Okay, let's whatever you feel like. You don't have to go so far away.
So, as I said, science was always a big passion for me. I think I would, from many different pathways, I would always end up to biomedical science. There are other types of science that I like. I read about psycholinguistics. I like a lot of psychology. I like a lot of psychology as well. So getting involved with the biology of, again, you see biology, I mean, I cannot even do it. I always end up there.
There's no other way.
Exactly. So no. I let this out. I'm also extremely interested in architecture. So this is a point that I was always thinking. As I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, I like creativity, but I also like solid science. So I think everything I would end up doing if I was not doing my current job, if I didn't have this career path, probably would combine both. And architecture is one of those. So I like science, I like art, and I like traveling. So something with the 3 of them.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, and it works with your personality as well.
And I have to make a confession.
Yes.
That I didn't start with that. I spent several years of my life writing in travel magazines.
Oh, that's really cool.
Before getting into biology, before starting biology and my PhD degree.
So what prompted the change?
My love for science and biology. That
you decided you're going to give it a go and just try it out to go into science.
Exactly. So I was always driven by science. And I remember as a kid, I was always telling that I want to create new medication. I want to save people from diseases that nobody else can save them. It was normal for me to evolve this way, I guess.
It's clearly a vocation. So going in the future direction now, what are your future plans? Where do you see yourself in a few years? But also if you could do something, let's say start your own company or do something else, what would you like to do? Let's say you have resources, which is the key thing that one needs, and you could change something. What would you do?
So creating my own company was actually never the top of the list of things that I would like to do. I work better in organized environments. And this is one of the items I understood about myself with the career coaching and why they told me, okay, you need a company around 100 people. You need the rest of the department set up. So you see, you have other people doing it for you. So I don't think that this would be what I would like to do. I'm focused in creating effective solutions to treat patients. What would be extremely interesting for me is to do this on a way that are accessible for a large number of patients. What we see now in all the development, including the work that I'm doing currently, is that most medications are available US, EU, or other large markets, the economies that can afford these therapies. How can we make these cutting-edge therapies affordable to other economies that are not, for people that do not have the same means like us? And this has a lot of technical challenges. So solving these type of technical challenges would be extremely interesting to me.
That sounds extremely cool. These are very complex problems, but your background in dealing with different types of problems right now would come in handy, and then you could really apply this to making a bigger change and bigger impact. I do like this idea, yeah. So I know that you work a lot. I can imagine you work a lot, and then you also need time for your family. But you mentioned traveling is something that you like to do. What else do you like to do in your free time and also to grow as a person, not only with respect to your career?
Apart from my work, the three things that I love, and there are three things that I'm happy that I share with my family, my husband and son. So we love traveling, we like food, and we like films.
Oh, lovely.
So we travel a lot. I have traveled all around the world, and we do this. I do it for work, and I do it personally. I like fine dining, but I don't like cooking. I love doing desserts.
Yes.
And then we have cinema nights, so with my family every week.
What's a good movie that you have recently seen?
So I will say what I have seen is a film that I'm trying to see like 3 weeks now, and always something happened in the last moment I don't see. Is Poor Things by Lanthimos. So this is my target
really
to
good.
see.
Yes, you
this
should
evening.
See it. I totally recommend. It's
I love Lanthimos in general.
I love him as well. All of his previous movies, they just always have this, the essence. And I just love his shots as well. Artistically, just extremely pleasing. Poor Things, really an experience. I managed to go to the cinema to see it and loved it.
I'll see tonight. So this was my focus the last 3 weeks, and always something happens. I remember when I saw Dogtooth, and again, you have to be from a Mediterranean background to really appreciate the focus of this film. I spent like 2 weeks trying to realize whether I hate it or I love it.
It leaves you with a lot of feelings afterwards, right? Like you remember these movies, and you remember that they carry a lot. I really do like the way that it works. You have to see it. Like, honestly, I hope you find the time today. All right, I would like to now go to the ending and first of all ask you for one key piece of advice for someone who is considering working in biotech industry. What would you advise them? And then also a take-home message, maybe a little bit about the misconceptions of the industry. So what do you want people to get out of this interview as a positive take on the biotech industry and your company in general?
So regarding the message to people that are thinking going to industry, I would say try it. As everything else in our life, we have to try to see whether we like it or not. The career paths are never a straight line, regardless how perfectly we plan them at the beginning. There are turns. on the road, there are bumps on the road, but if we don't try, we'll never know whether we ended where we wanted to be or when we happen to be. So we have our career on our own hands and we have to try to get there. That being said, there are means that we can see whether for every career change we're doing, whether we have more or less possibilities to be successful, whether we like it enough to be successful. Because if you like something, you will be successful.
Yeah.
So employ that means reach out to your network, reach out to your role models or to the persons that you would like to be your role models. Most people are much more friendly than you think. Just reach out. Somebody is through LinkedIn.
True.
People usually answer. Reach out to your network, reach out to somebody who's not at your network, ask your questions, go to conferences and meetings, approach the people that you want to learn from them, and then take your decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised with doing this season. None of the guests for now I have actually met before. I just reached out to people that I found, will be inspiring or they say something that I want to hear. And everybody was extremely positive, and this is something that is really encouraging. You really can reach out and people usually approach it with much more human aspect than you would assume, which is really cool. I like this. All right. Thank you so much, Peggy. This was extremely, extremely interesting. And honestly, it's such a unique opportunity to hear from someone at your level and with your background, because there's a lot in this conversation that can help people who are considering different aspects of both industries. And I think it was really, really nice. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for providing your expertise.
It was a great pleasure. It was a very enjoyable discussion, and I would be happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Yes, if something comes up, I will be sure to reach out to you. Yes, I wish you all the best. I hope you enjoy the movie. You find the time to enjoy the movie.
Thank you.
Yes. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kasia. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye. This was Kasia Kuzmicz-Kowalska and Science on Trial and Error. Thanks for listening and good luck in your quests beyond academia.